Behavior Guidance, Part 2.1. We are continuing with our outline of what is behavior guidance before we move into why do children misbehave and how do we promote functional behaviors. To wrap up our focus on what is behavior guidance, we need to discuss the purpose of behavior guidance. Behavior guidance's purpose is to support the growth of effective life skills, not just to control annoying behaviors. Yes, when we're coming into work, more than likely we just want to survive our shift for the day. We want to make it to Friday. We want to make it to winter or spring or summer break. We want to control those annoying behaviors. Those are definitely some immediate goals. However, the bigger picture, the bigger purpose, the bigger outcome of behavior guidance is to support the growth, to support the development of effective life skills that children will carry on with them far outside of the time that they spend with us in our after-school programs. When we're talking about behavior guidance and the purpose, we really can categorize the purpose into two main ideas: short versus long-term goals. So let's go ahead and talk about short-term goals. Short-term goals are most commonly seen in our before and after school programs as rules and expectations. Our program should make sure to encompass the following rules and/or expectations as part of our short-term goals, the purpose of behavior guidance. First, we want to make sure that any behavior within our programs does not present a clear risk of harm, either to oneself or to others. This is a mouthful for students to try and remember. Maybe middle and high schoolers can better remember this, but a short and sweet way to refer to this rule or expectation is simply to be healthy. Second, we want rules or expectations that make sure that behavior is not infringing on the rights of others. In other words, be respectful. What does this mean, though, the rights of others? Well, we have to answer the question, do children, since that's who we're working with, have rights? And the answer is yes. In any democracy, children do have rights. We live in the United States of America. Our government is a democracy, and therefore we as adults do have rights, and children do have rights as well. So what are those rights? There are four main rights. Children have the right to be safe. They should be able to come in and out of our programs and know that they will be taken care of. They should know what the routine is. They feel comfortable. They don't have this underlying anxiety that something bad is going to happen when they are in our care. That is their right to be safe and to feel safe. They also have the right to avoid any unnecessary discomfort. This can come from the physical environment, and it can also come from the adults or from other students. Children should not have to be coming to environments where it is unbelievably hot or unbelievably cold and the heating and cooling systems in our classrooms are not working. Those are things that are not necessarily within our immediate control, but we do want to make sure to inform whoever is in charge of that so that children are avoiding any unnecessary discomfort. Making sure as well we have those conversations with parents if maybe they're not dressed appropriately for the weather. Now that's physical environment and discomforts, but we also want to make sure we as adults are not putting the children in a situation that creates potential discomfort. An example here might be that our programs require a mileage club. Maybe the students have to go and be walking or running for 15 minutes of their schedule. However, we have a student that maybe has a big scrape on their knee, or we have a student that we're noticing that their shoes are too tight or they have new shoes and they're getting blisters. We as the adults should be picking up on this and trying to adjust whatever we can to have that student avoid any unnecessary discomfort. Maybe it's talking to the parents and letting them know that the shoes are too tight, maybe trying to find resources if they don't have money to get them new shoes. Maybe it's just providing the Band-Aids for the new shoes that are creating blisters, or the child who fell down during the school day and now has this big cut, helping to tally laps for that day instead of having to go and do the activity themselves. We need to take note and make sure to have children avoid any unnecessary discomfort whenever we can control that. Additionally, we want to make sure that children are avoiding discomfort from other students. We shouldn't have students who are putting one another in situations such as taunting or bullying or making fun of them. That is unnecessary discomfort. We shouldn't be cramming too many of them to sit next to each other on a table. We can have them spread out more. We shouldn't have the kids pushing each other to try and get the spot that they want on the table. So it's our job to intervene in those cases to help them avoid unnecessary discomfort. Children also have a right to their possessions. Just like we wouldn't want anyone going through our stuff, children have a right for their stuff not to be meddled with, whether that's us as the adults or other children. Now, we may have made an agreement with parents that we have permission to go through a specific child's backpack because they keep forgetting their homework. And that's fine. But an appropriate way to go about this would be to remind the child, remember, your mom said that I can look in your backpack to double check if you do or do not have your homework, and then go ahead and go through the backpack. You can also ask the child to do it. Bring me your backpack, open it up. I want to watch you look for your homework in your backpack. You also protect their possessions from other children. Even though we have it in our program guidelines that children should not be bringing anything that they shouldn't be bringing to school, also shouldn't be coming to the after-school program, we know that often students do bring things that they shouldn't have on campus, and they do risk it being lost, stolen, or damaged. If we notice another student taking something, playing with something that's not theirs, we should intervene and direct the student to either put that away, remind the students that we don't play with things that don't belong to them, etc., and so on. But they shouldn't be bringing those to begin with, but when we do notice it, it is our job to protect those rights to their possessions. It is also our job to promote fairness. We need to make sure as much as possible that we as the adults are removing personal bias about how we feel about a certain child, how maybe we even feel or assumptions that we have about certain genders when we're interacting with students. We want to make sure that we're giving all children the same attention, the same protection as any other student. So children do have rights within our programs, and we want to make sure that they are not being violated. So back to our short-term goals. We have to be healthy. We also have to be respectful. When we have rules and expectations, we also want to make sure that we have some rule or expectation that encompasses being responsible, meaning that behavior must not unreasonably damage the environment, animals, objects, or various materials. So again, to summarize, we have be healthy, be respectful, and be responsible. Other examples of short-term goals might look like the following. Still sticking with the be rules, we have seen at one of our campuses, be kind, be safe, and be responsible. We still have be responsible, which was the last point of the previous slide. However, instead of saying be respectful, we have be kind, but it encompasses the same ideas. And instead of be healthy, we have be safe. Other ideas of short-term goals or rules or expectations have been shared with us from the assets training provided by Audra White. Those rules and expectations include to respect yourself, respect others, respect materials, and to take responsibility for your own actions. Overall, these are still encompassing the same short-term goals or purpose of behavior guidance. So, why are short-term goals or rules or expectations important? Yes, they are going to help us get through the day. They're going to help us control those annoying behaviors that we see every day that we go into work with students. But ultimately, bigger picture, these rules or these expectations are helping to set the foundation, to lay the groundwork for children to independently on their own begin thinking about, begin processing the consequences or the outcomes of their actions, of their behavior. So when we remind a student to be kind, to be responsible, to respect others, to take responsibility for your own actions, we're prompting them to think, oh, what I did caused this outcome. Now, when we say consequences, we tend to think of them as being negative. However, consequences can be positive or negative. Outcomes can be positive or negative. And we want children ultimately, though, to be making that connection between their behavior, their actions, and those outcomes. We need to take a moment, though, and dive a little bit deeper into consequences and children being able to accept the consequences of their own behavior. There are times that we as the adult do not need to provide further consequences. This is because children already experience many natural consequences for their behavior. A natural consequence is an outcome, a consequence, a result, an outcome that results from a situation, the child's behavior, without any external intervention, without the adult needing to come and do anything to change or control the conclusion, the result. A natural consequence. An example of a natural consequence is when a child is running down the hallways and trips and falls. Yes, we want to remind the child, be safe, we should be walking down the halls. This way we won't fall. But we don't necessarily need to provide any additional consequence of having them do a reflection sheet or having them practice walking in a line a couple minutes, because the natural consequence is that they fell. Now, if the child continues to run up and down the hallways and either they never fall or they continue to fall and they just don't care, then we do need to intervene and provide a logical consequence. A logical consequence results from a situation, again, that behavior that the child has engaged in, but now the adult does determine and control the conclusion. And it's a logical consequence because the consequence, the outcome, is directly related to the behavior problem. When we talked about in Behavior Guidance Part 1.1, the difference between punishment and guidance, we addressed the fact that consequences should be logical. They should relate to said behavior. If they don't directly relate to the inappropriate behavior that a child did, then we are engaging in punishment instead of guidance. So again, if we're sticking with this running example, the child has been running up and down the hallways either several days in a row or several times within the same day, and maybe they never fall down, and you keep reminding them, be safe, you need to walk or you might fall. We're trying to encourage them to think about their actions and possible consequences. However, because they don't fall, they're not really putting two and two together. So a logical consequence could be to do a behavior reflection form if it is really an ongoing and serious, always occurring, always talking to them behavior, in which the child is answering the questions of what they did, why it was inappropriate, and what they could have done differently. This is a logical consequence because it is having them immediately and directly think about their behavior and the possible problems and what they could have done differently that would have avoided that problem. Additionally, you could have the child practice walking up and down for a certain number of times or a certain amount of time. Now, you also can do these same logical consequences if a child is running repeatedly and they do fall. So they have their natural consequence, but they just don't care. If the natural consequence itself isn't enough, then yes, an adult does need to intervene and determine and control another outcome in addition to the natural consequence. When we are using natural or logical consequences, we are engaging in behavior guidance as opposed to punishment. Continuing on with this discussion about consequences, we do want to be careful to avoid rescuing children from the consequences of their own actions. Sticking with the running in the hallways when we should be walking. If a child is running and they fall down and they scrape their knee, and we as the adult immediately go up and say, "Oh, it's okay, I'm so sorry, here, let me clean that up. Oh man, accidents happen." We, in that response, did not at all have the child realize because you were running, you fell, you hurt yourself, you scraped your knee. Instead, we rescued them and said, "Oh, it's just an accident. Accidents happen. I'm so sorry." And sometimes that might be the case. Things do happen purely on accident. But we need to be careful about rescuing children or bailing them out from a situation that they have created. If they were running down the hallway when they knew they shouldn't have been, they were not being safe, going back to a rule or expectation, we need to make sure that they make that connection between the rule, their behavior, and their consequence. It's also important to note here, though, that sometimes the adult does need to intervene. Logical consequences are intervening. And this intervening isn't rescuing if we are having them take responsibility for their actions. To further explain this as well, children do have the right to call on us as the adult, someone bigger, someone stronger, someone with more authority, to help them when someone has violated their rights. We as adults do this with law enforcement. We have people that we can call when our rights have been violated. And we are the enforcement to the children who come to our program. So just like you wouldn't like it if you went up to a police officer and said, "Oh, that person hit my car," and the police officer says something, I'm trying to think of an example how we say it, like, "Oh, well, they didn't mean it. Oh, it was just an accident." Yeah, it was an accident, but they still hit my car. We need to make sure, in times when it is appropriate, that we are appropriately intervening to protect the rights of children. So to summarize this again, we're talking about short versus long-term goals of behavior guidance, which are the purpose that we want these rules, these expectations to be ingrained in the child. We want them to remember how we should or shouldn't behave long after they leave our programs. And we as the adults need to make sure that we are helping them understand the consequences of their actions, whether that's through natural or logical consequences, and that we're always remembering to protect their rights. So a quick side comment here as well that's related to this accepting of one's of actions or accepting consequences is, should we tell or ask children to apologize? The short answer is no. No child should be told or asked to say something that they really do not feel. This is lying. When a child does something, it can be our instinct to say, "Tell them you're sorry. You need to apologize for that." But if the child doesn't truly feel remorse, if they don't truly feel bad about what they did, we are actually then encouraging the child to lie. And I can't think of any other situation that we would say, "Oh yeah, it's appropriate. Tell them to lie." Yet, when we ask or tell a child to apologize and they don't mean it, we are telling them to lie. So what do we do if we aren't asking them to apologize? Instead, we should be pointing out how the other child feels. This is going to help the child who has done the offense, who has caused the harm, to empathize. We're getting them to remember a time that they felt bad or a time that they felt hurt by pointing out, look it, you were running, you weren't watching where you were going, and you bumped into your friend and now they fell down. By having them remember a time that maybe they fell down, they may more naturally want to apologize, remembering how that felt when they were hurt in a previous time. Additionally, with our own experience of being adults, we might pick up on subtle cues of body language and notice that a child wants to say they're sorry, but just isn't vocalizing it. They're just too shy. So in that case, we can ask, would you like to tell Luke that you're sorry about what happened? But we aren't demanding them to say that they're sorry. We also could ask the child, would you like me to tell him that you're sorry? Because in that moment, they might feel very bad, very ashamed, very embarrassed about what harm they have caused to the other student. Sticking back or going back to if we don't ask or require children to apologize, then what do we do? There are several other ways, going with that running example and someone falling down. An example of that could be to have the child have to go get the Band-Aid and bring it to the adult who will apply the proper first aid. They aren't saying they're sorry, but they're taking responsibility for their actions. And in the process of walking and reflecting, they may come back and decide to say they're sorry. They might have to walk that child to the office where they can get an ice pack. There are other ways for children to show that they're sorry without actually having to say the words, I am sorry. And they also might come back in a little bit of time and spontaneously apologize on their own. But in the moment, they might just be feeling too much embarrassment to where they don't want to say it right then and there. Okay. So to wrap up our discussion on what is the purpose of behavior guidance, we need to quickly reflect on long-term goals. We already talked about short-term goals. Short-term goals, we see them as our rules and our expectations to get through the day, to get through our program, to get to the weekend. Long-term goals are to assist the children in their overall journey, their overall development to becoming a responsible adult and helping them to develop their self-control. We may never see the actual long-term outcome of the children who are in our care, but by the way that we interact with them, by the way that we model behavior to them, our short-term goals are hopefully going to transform into helping to reach the long-term goal of being a kind and caring and responsible adult. So what do we then do in the moment in our programs to see if we're meeting these long-term goals? This little litmus test is just questions that you can self-reflect on. Are the adults in our program warm? Are they nurturing? Are they emotionally available to the children? Would I want my child to absorb, to be like, to have the personality traits, the communication styles, and problem-solving behaviors of the adults that are caring for them in this program? Do these adult role models set an example for behavior that I value and that I would want my child to imitate? If the answers are no, or if they're not really, maybe some of the time, maybe some things yes, maybe some things no, then we need to self-reflect again ourselves to decide what do we need to work on as the adult, because we are setting the example for these children. What do we need to change about our behavior? Are we holding ourselves to the same standard that we are holding the children to? And if the answer is no, then we need to work on that. By working on ourselves, we are in turn working on the long-term goals for these children in our care. That wraps up our information for behavior guidance part 1.2, focusing on what is behavior guidance and the overall purpose of behavior guidance. Thank you for watching and stay tuned as we jump into part 2.1 in our coming video.